Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is invisible inheritance. What we're talking about is the fact that from the moment we're born, we're taught how to act, how to think, what to believe, how to treat ourselves and other people. And we imprint the behaviors and attitudes that are presented to us. So today we're going to explore that and the question of who are we authentically beneath the replicated behaviors and patterns that we have inherited. So it should be an interesting conversation. And before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. Great to have you here. And welcome to everybody else who's joining us. We're just going to take a minute or two and get present. So if you'll take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light, lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, all your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So I think this is such an interesting conversation to have. We're talking about invisible inheritance. We think that we are our own people, and we live our lives often in reaction to our parents. We either become like our parents or we become sort of the opposite, like rebelling against being what our parents are, right? And that may be conscious to a certain degree, but I would bet that every one of us has had a moment where we have been in a situation and then we all of a sudden realize that we're acting out our parents, that, oh my gosh, that's my mother's voice. Oh my gosh, that's my father's voice. Like, where did that come from? And so it's like we inherit these programs, like we're generational clones that have some variation from the original, but have the original components that we came from. And we most often don't ever see these things. And we think we are our own people. We have our beliefs and our perspectives, and they're often unexamined. And this is one of the big reasons why in these conversations, we're always encouraging awareness, being awake, being present, being able to be responsive rather than reactive. Because what happens is we are a complex of all these different patterns that have been patterned into us by our surroundings, by our parents, by our culture, by our affiliations, and by our experiences. But the thing that we get to notice is that these things are automatic. These things are most often invisible to us until we start looking. And I had a wonderful, remarkable conversation with one of my clients yesterday about this, and they were recognizing how their behaviors were so like the behaviors of their parents, of their mother, of their father, particularly their mother. Celery juice, yum. Anyway, so it was such a revelation for this person to recognize, oh my gosh, you know, my how much of me is me? How much of me is uniquely me? And maybe we are a unique combination of all these different programs. But as we start digging through, who are we without those programs? You know, what is our unique essence? So we also talk a lot about being connected, being centered, being present in your own being. And from that space, in this moment, from that space, we have greater access to our essential selves, to go beyond the reactivity, to go beyond the programmed responses, and to allow ourselves, as we are able to better observe these different patterns, then we have the beginning of being able to disentangle them and to recognize that these things we think we believe, these behaviors we think we have, these priorities, these values, until they're examined, until we really look and challenge them, can we claim them as our own consciously? So an example is being brought up in religious tradition. You know, we are given these beliefs, like a whole doctrine that is proscribed and that dictates our interpretations of circumstances, of situations, our judgments about ourselves and others. So that's an easy thing to look at because it is a body of beliefs, but those beliefs were given to us. It's not like we ever chose them. For most of us, it's not like we ever chose them. It's that we were encoded with them in our upbringing, and we were encoded with ways to treat others. You know, to like one of the things that I had a challenge with in my life was anger, lots of anger. I even had an employer once tell me that I had anger issues, and the truth is they were right. And it wasn't easy for me to hear, but it was true. Anyway, my family has a pattern of anger. And I learned that in my family. I learned that that was a first response, a best defense. You know, I wasn't even aware that I had learned it until this person pointed out to me that I had anger issues, and I chose to address it, but I didn't recognize it as not me. I recognized it as my problem, like something wrong with me, rather than recognizing that, oh, wow, this is an inherited pattern. This is a programmed behavior. This is not mine. This is what I was taught. And I never knew to question it or challenge it, because that's just how it was. When we grow up, where are we getting our experience of reality? Where are we getting the rules through which we interpret reality in our experience? And we never question it, because that is the only reality. That's the environment that we are cultivated in. So we are going to be a product of that environment, whether it's by adopting those beliefs or reviling them, in reaction to them. But we are shaped by those inputs in our lives. And the opportunity to look at where certain beliefs or behaviors came from, rather than just blaming ourselves, punishing ourselves for acting or thinking or being a certain way. If we can recognize the source of those patterns, and they can be great patterns too. I'm not saying that all those patterns are negative, but these patterns are patterns that we have been encoded with, and then we act from those patterns, robotically, because we don't even know that they're not ours. We don't know that it's not our own expression. So it's very interesting. This is a way that we have generational patterns. It's a fascinating thing to be playing out these familial patterns. It's not, I guess in some ways it's the question of nature and nurture. And the thing is that so much of our experience of ourselves is a function of nurture, in that we're encoded, that we imprint with all these patterns. And it's often a source of pain in that insular culture that may be the thing that identifies us as our uniqueness, in our authentic selfhood, that is specific to this unique being that each of us is. So there were certain creative impulses that I always had. And actually, it's interesting because my mom was very much a kind of a crafter type of person. She liked to do a lot of creative things with her hands, and it may have come from that. Like that might have been imprinted in me. I don't know, but creativity and creation has always been something really important to me. And actually, there was a value for art, just maybe not for artists. I'm not sure, but I wanted to go to art school, and that was not acceptable, but that was really what my heart called for. And so it wasn't a deliberate fighting against the tide. That was what was emergent in me. And it took a lot in my life to give myself permission to pursue it and to gain some approval, which I very much needed at the time, despite myself, to be able to follow that pursuit. So it's interesting, in the process of reaching toward freedom, what I notice in the work that I do with folks is it's very much about releasing these patterns, releasing the trauma, releasing the pain, or dissolving it, transmuting it, whatever. But it's like taking off all these garments that are covering up our essential being. And as those veils are lifted, we become more and more of our authentic self and our authentic expression, and have a greater and greater capacity to fulfill that soul song, that calling of our hearts and souls that I believe we each came here to fulfill. That we each have a unique role to play, and the freer we can become of these patterns that were unexamined, we might decide to own some of them and embrace them ourselves, but it's really hard to distinguish what's me making that decision and what's my conditioning making that decision. Rosalind says, seeing the container and dissolving the boundary when they are no longer needed. Exactly. I like that. Thank you, Rosalind. So, because it is a container. It is a container. All these programmed behaviors are containers. You know, so one of the things that I address a lot with clients is facing their potential and having a conflict between being able to be fully expressed and also wanting to be invisible. And as someone said yesterday in a session, look at me, don't look at me. That we have these counter impulses. Look at me, don't look at me. And or see me, don't look at me. And it's very interesting when we recognize that these are things we've been taught. These are things that we've been taught, and we get to choose whether we own them or not once we start recognizing them. So another example is I've been working with a client who grew up in a very abusive environment. And our last session, we were addressing issues of worthiness and this deep experience of literally feeling like a piece of trash, like a throwaway person, and feeling unworthy of goodness, unworthy of joy, unworthy of a good life. And I asked, well, what does it look like to be worthy? And there were all these conditions. And I said, who decides? Who decides? Is it all these conditions that make you worthy? And what they recognized is that they had adopted the feeling of being unworthy, the notion of being unworthy, as in response to the treatment that they had had by these parents. And because the parents treated them so badly, their belief was that they were unworthy. And even if that was the parents' belief, and I don't know that it was or wasn't, does that mean that that had to be this person's belief? Did they need to assume that belief? And for the first time, they recognized that this was something that had been given to them, essentially, and they'd been carrying it around for all this time and letting it weigh them down and believing that it was the truth, that it was an indisputable truth. And all of a sudden, they had the opportunity to recognize that it was just a belief, that it was just something that was given to them. You know, they learned how to treat themselves by the people that were treating them poorly. That's what we learn, and we adopt it like that's how it should be, because we don't know different. And so in this moment, this person was able to say, you know what? Maybe I don't have to carry that anymore. Maybe I can actually put that down. And I don't have to be at the effect of it anymore. And the result of that is a profound freedom to recognize that we keep recreating these things. You know, I know when I when I was growing up, I had a lot of opposition. Good morning, Robin. Welcome. So good to have you here with us this morning. So there was a lot of opposition from me, resistance, rebellion. And it wasn't until I got to college, where my parents weren't there to be for me to push against, that I realized I internalized all these messages that I had been rebelling against. You know, that my lack of self-esteem was something that I had internalized, that it wasn't just something that was imposed outside, it was something now I had adopted, and I was imposing it on myself. I had imprinted it. And the thing is that I didn't at the time recognize, wait a second, it's not me. That's not me. It's that other voice in my head. That's not my voice, and I don't have to listen to it. You know, we get, I don't know if you have this experience, but in certain circumstances, I hear things, I hear voices of my parents, you know, commentary on, not literally here, but it's like there's a tape that runs that gives this commentary, and I get to say, wait a second, that's not me. That's that program running, and I don't have to pay attention to that. I don't have to own it. I don't have to listen to it. I don't have to follow it. It's just an old tape. So Rosalind says, stepping into the hero role or the Shiro role, I'm not waiting for someone to save me. I'm expressing myself fully and blossom into greater impact. I can do hard things. That's beautiful, Rosalind. We do not need to be limited by our limited thinking. Once we are able to identify that it's not ours, that it's an invisible inheritance. When we make it visible, that's the beginning of our path to freedom. That's the beginning of our path to more authentic self-expression. And disentangling what's me and what's not me together, it's not always the easiest thing. It's not always the easiest thing, because we're inclined to believe that we are what we believe. We are inclined to believe that we are what we feel, what we think, that's who we are, and we identify with it. And it can be really useful to query ourselves, to wonder, where did that idea come from? Where did this reaction come from? Where did this behavior come from? What are the thoughts underlying that? And where did those thoughts come from? You know, we have a lot of cultural thoughts too, about what's right and wrong, what's success, what's laziness, what's valued. We have lots of programs that are running all the time. When we take the time or have the grace of perspective, a moment to be able to see, oh my gosh, here it is. What's this? What's this? I'm suffering right now. What's going on that I'm suffering? You know, what are the stories that I'm telling myself? And where did they come from? Where did they come from? Where did I learn this story? Where did I learn this pattern? And as we explore this path more fully, we are stepping into our potential. We are for freedom. We are providing ourselves with an opportunity to become more of our authentic selves. So I invite you to check out, be alert to what are you thinking? What are the patterns? What are your knee-jerk reactions? Where'd that come from? Do you see a lineage for that? It's fascinating and it's freeing. So, and we don't have to be at the effect of it once we can identify it. So that's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And as always, it is such a privilege to have these conversations together. I'm so grateful to you for joining me. And until next time, so much